So, Jai Bhim and Namo Buddhaya once again. We will begin with the book uh, 7. And so far we have covered the about 6 books of the Buddha and His Dhamma. That's already about 533 pages. And we will begin to continue to study the book number 7, which is titled as The Wanderer's Last Journey. So it's about the journey of the Buddha towards his, what we can say, the enlightenment and Mahaparinibbana. And we have already covered a lot of ground up to this point, where the Buddha is reaching to the old age. And here in this particular book number 7, we are going to study the 3 parts. Part 1 is about meeting of those near and dear. Part 2 is about leaving Vaishali. And part 3 is about his end, Mahaparinibbana of the Buddha. So part 1 is about the meeting of those near and one. And the Buddha had very close people around him. And Baba Ambedkar talks here about the meeting of the Buddha with those near and dear ones. And this particular section is divided into, part 1 is divided into 5 subparts. And we are going to look at some of the subparts today, particularly the centers of his preaching and the places he visited. And if we get time, we are going to look into the meeting of the Buddha with his mother and his son, and between wife and husband. So let's see how it goes. So to begin with the book number 7, the first part 1 and the subpart 1 is about the center of his preachings. And the centers of his preachings are very important for us to understand that the Buddha taught in terms of his, what we can say about, the different geographical places that the Buddha visited. So it is not that after the appointment of the missionaries, the Lord sat at one place. The Buddha didn't sit at one place after the appointment of the preachers or the missionaries. And the astonishing phrase here that comes in the verse number 1 is, he too continued to be his own missionary. Now imagine the Buddha, the enlightened one, continued to be his own missionary. In other words, he carried forth by teaching and walking across the length and breadth of a country. And I think in Buddhism, it is very important for us. So I think it's very important for us in those who are practicing Buddhist, that you see, we cannot but continue to teach the Dhamma. And as Baba Ambedkar says, that to teach the Dhamma is to serve the humanity. And in order to serve the humanity, the best way by which we can serve the humanity is by preaching the Dhamma of the Buddha. And I think that's very important for all of us.
Excuse me, Mangesh.
Yes.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Can you stop the video so that audio can be clear?
Okay. Let me see if the video goes. Is that okay? Is better now? Is it better now? Hello?
You can stop the video.
I have already stopped the video. Is it better now?
Yes.
Is it better now?
Yes, Mangesh.
Yes.
Okay. So, he too continued to be his own missionary. And that's the example for all of us to be, our own missionaries. And Buddhism sort of gives us a kind of, the Buddha gives us an example as to how we should be our own missionaries. And the second point is very important. The Lord seems to have made certain places chief centers of his missionary work. Of such centers, the chief were Shravasti and Rajagraha. And we know that the Buddha spent a lot of time in these two places, Shravasti and Rajagraha. And as Baba Ambedkar says in the verse number 4, he visited Shravasti about 75 times and Rajagraha about 24 times. And we know that both of these places, both of the cities were very big cities, and Buddha had lots of followers in these cities. So he, certain places, he made the minor centers. So now in the verse number 6, we have other places. They were Kapilvastu, which he visited 6 times. Vaishali, which he visited 6 times. And Kammasa Dhamma, 4 times. So what Baba Ambedkar is doing, that he is giving us various locations of the Buddha, where the Buddha spent maximum time, and the places where he visited many times, like Shravasti, Rajagraha, Kapilavastu, and Vaishali, and Kammas Dhamma. But very interestingly, the part two, subpart 2 is about the places he visited, and I'm going to read it through because there are a lot of names that we need to bear in mind. So besides these main and minor centers, the Blessed Lord visited many other places during the course of his missionary tour. He visited Uppkata, Nadika, Sal, Assapura, Ghositaram, Nalanda, Appana, Ituma. He visited Upasad, Ichanaukal, Chandalkuppa, Kushinara. He visited Devadaha, Pava, Ambasanda, Setavya, Anupiya, Ugunamma. The names of the places he visited show that he traveled over Sakya Desha, Kuru Desha, Anga Desha. These appear to be a few places, but what distance do they cover? Rajagraha from Lumbini is not less than 250 miles. This just gives us an idea of distances. So if you take into consideration the distance between Rajagraha and Lumbini, it is not less than 250 miles. So this gives us an idea of distances. These distances, the Lord walked on foot. He did not even use a bullock cart. So see, if you look at these distances that the Buddha covered during his majesty, are the places which were long distance, and the Buddha didn't walk. The Buddha didn't use any convenience to go from one place to another. In fact, he walked all over the places. So the verse number 9, in his wanderings, he had no place to stay until later on, when his late disciples built viharas and resting places, which he and his bhikshus used as halts on their journeys. Most often, he lived under the shade of wayside trees. And that is the case. That is true. Throughout the Buddhist history, that the Buddha had walked all over the places, and sometimes he didn't have the proper places to stay, and many a times he lived under the shade of the wayside trees. Now verse number 10 goes on like this. He went from place to place, sometimes from village to village, resolving the doubts and difficulties of those who were willing to accept his message, controverting the arguments of those who were his opponents, and preaching his gospel to those who, like children, came to him for guidance. The Blessed Lord knew that all those who came to listen to him were not all of them intelligent. Not all of them came with an open and a free mind. He had even warned the brethren or the Sangha that there were 3 sorts of listeners. And this is very important for us to understand what sort of the listeners that the Buddha thought about. So there are 3 sorts of listeners, and verse number 13 lists out the one type of listener: the empty head, the fool who cannot see, though oft and oft unto brethren going, he hears their talk, beginning, middle, and end, but can never grasp it. Wisdom is not his. So you see, the first kind of a person, because the Buddha and his disciples went across all the directions to teach the Dhamma. And when they teach the Dhamma, it is not that everybody were of the equal intelligence. They were of the different varying intelligences. And not all of them, as it is said in verse number 11, came with an open and a free mind. So they already came with a closed and biased minds. And therefore, he has warned the Sangha that there are 3 kinds of listeners, 3 kinds of the people who listen to the teachings. The first that we have just seen is the empty head, a person who is having an empty head, and because they are having an empty head, they cannot, as we can see, they are like the fools who cannot see, though often they the Sangha or the bhikshus are going to them, and he listens to their talk in the beginning, middle, and end, but can never grasp it. With wisdom is not his. So there is one who is called the empty-headed. Okay, so one sort of a person who is difficult to teach is empty-headed. The second sort of a person is better than he, the man of scattered brain. So there is another kind of listener. And that kind of a listener is the Buddha categorized as the scattered brains, who oft and oft unto the brethren going hears all their talk, beginning, middle, end, and seated there can grasp the very words, it rising not retains, blank is his mind. So there is a second kind of a person whose head is not empty, whose brain is not empty, but their brain is scattered. And because their brain is scattered, they listen to the Dhamma from the beginning, middle, and end. And sitting there listening to the Dhamma, they can grasp the very words, so they can understand the very words. But when they get up, they don't retain anything because their brains are so scattered and their mind is blank. So you see, let me read the second type of a person, scattered brain. Better than he, the man of scattered brains, who oft and oft unto the brethren going, hears all the talk, beginning, middle, and middle end, and seated there can grasp the very words, it rising not retains, blank is his mind. So the second sort of person is a person who is having the scattered brain, and they listen to the Dhamma from the beginning, middle, and end, and they can grasp the very words when the Dhamma is taught to them, but after getting up, they don't retain anything, and blank is their mind. The third kind of a person is very interesting. Better than these, the man of wisdom wide, he oft and oft unto the brethren going. Better than these men, these the man of wisdom. Better than this, the man of wisdom wide, he oft and oft unto the brethren going, hears all their talk, beginning, middle, end, and seated there can grasp the very words, bears all in mind, steadfast, unwavering, skilled in the norm, and what comes confirmed thereto. So this is the third kind of a person is very important. They are having a wisdom, they listen to the Dhamma talk from the beginning, middle, end, and they seated there can grasp the very words. They can understand the very words that are being taught. And not only they hear or bear the mind or grasp the very words, they bear all in the mind. So they try to bear all in their minds. They are steadfast, they are unwavering, and they are skilled in the norm. They are skilled in the Dhamma, and what conforms to the Dhamma. So you see, there are three kinds of people that we meet whenever we teach the Dhamma. The first one is the empty-headed. The second one is the person whose brain is scattered, whose minds are scattered. The third is the person who is wise. And this is very important for us to understand as to which category we ourselves fall into. Either we are empty-head, who can listen but who never grasps, and we don't grow. That person doesn't grow any wisdom. The second kind of a person who listen to the Dhamma talk, they grasp the very words, but rising from the Dhamma talk, their mind retains nothing, and their mind is blank. So this is the second kind of a person, scattered brain ones. The third one is a wisdom wise, and they grasp the very words, they bear all in mind, they retain the Dhamma teaching in their minds, and they are steadfast, unwavering, skilled in the Dhamma, and what confirms thereto. Notwithstanding these, the Lord was never tired of going from place to place preaching his gospel. This is very important. The Buddha met all sort of people when he taught the Dhamma all over the places, and he walked all over the places. And he met the people who were empty-headed, who were scattered brains, who were wisdom wide. And, notwithstanding this, the Lord was never tired of going from place to place preaching his gospel. So the Buddha went everywhere preaching his Dhamma. So as a bhikkhu, the Lord never had more than 3 pieces of cloth. He lived on 1 meal a day, and he begged his food from door to door every morning. His mission was the hardest task assigned to any human being. You see, the Buddhas, to teach the Dhamma is not an easy task. Going from one place to another, going from door to door for begging the food is not an easy life. It's a very hard life. So you see, the verse number 18 says his mission was the hardest task assigned to any human being. He discharged it so cheerfully that we can imagine that the Buddha was never tired of teaching his Dhamma, and he went on to preach his Dhamma very cheerfully. So what I thought I will do today, I will stop here with these 2 sub parts of the part 1, and we will have a brief class today, and we will continue next week going further into our journey of the Buddha and his Dhamma. So far, do you have any questions and any comments to be made on two subparts that we just studied?
So the Buddha has told the three kinds of people. One is full with no wisdom, one with little brains, and third with man having wisdom. So the full with no wisdom can never grasp the words because he doesn't have wisdom, prajna. The little person with little brains can understand the words, but he forgets. He cannot retain the teaching of Buddha. And third, with a man with wisdom can grasp and can learn and understand his teachings. So that is why Buddha has given first and foremost importance to prajna, wisdom.
Good. Anybody, any other point? Now you see, when we are talking about these three kinds of people, sometimes we are like that, sometimes we are empty-headed, and sometimes we ourselves are fools who are not able, we listen to the Dhamma, but we don't grasp any words or any meaning out of it. And sometimes we don't grow in the wisdom, right? And sometimes, we are scattered brains when we are listening to the Dhamma. So we can grasp the very words, but we do not grasp or retain anything, and our mind is blank. And sometimes we are very attentive, very unwavering, very steadfast. We are skilled in the Dhamma. We know a little bit of the Dhamma. And when we listen to more Dhamma, we begin to grasp more of the Buddha's teachings. Now, here, it is from the point of view of those poor people who are going out and teaching the Dhamma of the Buddha. And the Buddha says that, Baba Ambedkar says that notwithstanding this, even if people are of the different attitudes, we are not supposed to get tired. We continue to teach the Dhamma. And that's the beauty of it. We don't categorize the people, as the Buddha never categorized the people in terms of the dumb-witted. He taught everybody, depending on the stations of the people, depending on the backgrounds of the people, the Buddha taught. The Buddha was not, making efforts. And I think this is the point that we need to take into consideration in this part, is that the Buddha was never tired of teaching the Dhamma. The Buddha was never tired of going from house to house, door to door to meet the people. And I think that's the very important point that we need to bear in our minds. Right? So, it applies to us also. Sometimes we are empty-headed, sometimes we are scattered brains, sometimes wisdom, why we have wisdom, wide wisdom. At times, we are in a different, moods and different mentalities. But that's also a message for us to continue to study the Dhamma. Isn't it? It doesn't matter what sort of a state of brains we have. We continue, we push ourselves to learn the Dhamma. And likewise, those who teach the Dhamma, they continue to push to teach the Dhamma. Right? So any other point?
Yeah, just one point. I think, and those who are spreading the Dhamma, they should not be discouraged, because there are, as Buddha said, there are three types of people. So every person will not be agree with the correct thoughts. Only when the wise is there, then your thought can be correctly propagated. Otherwise, there are other two types of persons, so they won't accept that thought. So no point in getting discouraged.
That's a good point. There is nothing to be discouraged. We can look at in the example of Dr. Baba Sahib's life, when he started, mobilizing the people couldn't understand him, but he pressed on. He kept on teaching, he kept on talking. And we know the result today, isn't it? Some of the first meetings of Baba Ambedkar's were difficult. People were not paying attention and they couldn't understand what Baba Ambedkar was talking about. But eventually we know what has happened. Everybody begin to understand, realize the message of Baba Ambedkar, right?
Yes, very true.
Anybody else? If not, then
We find same qualities of Buddha and Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar.
Yes. So we all have to cultivate patience to teach the Dhamma, because teaching the Dhamma is not easy. It needs a lot of patience. It needs a lot of skills. It needs a lot of understanding. And as we share the Dhamma with others, our own understanding begins to grow. That is the beauty of the Dhamma. So if there is no any other comment, we will stop here for today. And there are a lot of things to cover in the coming classes. And because I'm stuck in this Himachal Pradesh and there is a heavy rain here, the internet is not working. So we will end our class here today. Is that okay for all?
Okay. Jai Bhim.
Jai Bhim.
Yeah. Thank you.